Hello. In this small video, I'm going to talk to you about performance-based public procurement. I will start by presenting the concept of performance in public procurement and also talk about its measurement. Then I will go towards performance-based procurement and its specific competence requirements. This is a quite commonly seen illustration of different concepts around performance. We can see that there are inputs, processes, outputs, and outcomes. In traditional approach to procurement, we emphasize the inputs, the resources, employees, these type of things that we want to get. But then in the performance-based procurement, the attention shifts towards outputs and outcomes. Sometimes maybe also we can consider processes and measure processes and still talk about performance and performance improvement through public procurement. But in this right-hand side of this illustration, outputs are maybe sometimes quite easy to understand what I mean. They can, for example, mean the number of customer interactions. Quality is already a little bit more complicated and more multidimensional aspect to be considered. And when we go towards outcomes, the benefits, for example, for the public customer, it's much more difficult to clarify and specify what do those outcomes actually mean. But in the end, that's what is all about, and does it really count? So it's about getting the right outcomes out of the purchased services, for example. One of the challenges in public service provision in general, and also in applying performance-based public procurement, is the measurement of outputs and outcomes. In principle, we can identify at least these 4 different approaches to the measurement. First of all, we can consider output weighting method, and this relates to the situation where we, for example, have a measure for output in a quantitative manner. We can count, for example, the number of service interactions in certain service. And then if we want to better capture the variance of those interactions, we can use weights to capture the required resources in different types of interactions. So we can start like forming different forms of interactions and specify and classify those, and also put some weights depending on how demanding interactions they are. In the second approach, we try to identify criterion for the service, which is taking the outcome under investigation. For example, in a teaching offering a course, we don't measure the number of courses, which could be the output measure, but we measure learning. So what is the outcome from the, for example, a course? Similarly, in police service, quantitative output measure could be a number of crimes, but the outcome measure would be something related to solved crimes. Then the third perspective considers more extensively the life cycle perspective of the purchased product or service, and this contains a more long-term perspective, and it requires, of course, monitoring of the use of the service or product that we have been procured, and for example, the total cost of ownership type of concept could be utilized in measuring this. In the third approach, we pay attention to the service user need. So in public services, this may be quite feasible approach. For example, there is in health and social care, we can pay attention to how client care intensity varies in alignment with the diagnosed functional ability of the clients. And then we can also pay attention to the change in the service needs, which are like reached by using the service under investigation. So for example, in healthcare, so if we buy some preventive care, we can maybe see that a certain level of decrease is observed in the need for corrective care. So this might also be a way of like getting some understanding of the outcome of health services. Then going more deeply to the performance-based procurement and its potential benefits. Why we should pay attention to this kind of approach, and maybe not for the common approach, pay attention to the inputs. So in some cases, especially, this might be a very tempting approach. It may optimize public value creation, and to capture better the service user perspective and pay attention to the benefits for the public service users. It concentrates not on how, but on what. So basically, it also means that the public buyer organization doesn't need to pay so much attention to how the problem is solved, because the supplier will do that. At the same time, it gives also flexibility and freedom for the supplier to operate, plan, organize its resources. It may also motivate suppliers to identify innovative solutions. And it also has the benefit to clarify the benefits aimed in the beginning of the relationship with the supplier. So this might also be beneficial. So it's clear already from the beginning what is the aimed performance and benefit. Here we illustrate the different practices of performance-based procurement. Actually, there is very much also in common with any type of procurement. So not everything is different, but more like that there are certain specific features which can be linked to this type of procurement. So in the preparation phase, when we prepare the performance-based procurement, for example, the definition of the desired change might be something which needs to be paid more attention than in a common way of conducting procurement. The targeted outcomes need to be specified already in the beginning. There might even be some types of co-creation involved in the preparation phase, although this is not a necessity, because this performance-based procurement can be implemented in many different ways. But definitely in the beginning, there is also a need to define some measures or targets that will be used as a part of the contract with the supplier. So we need some efforts to understand what is actually the performance that will be bought from the supplier. In the tendering phase, there is much in common in principle, but there might be a need to add some flexibility in this type of procurement, because as it is not so clear how it will be done, and it's maybe not so important in the beginning to specify how the supplier is solving the need. So there is a good idea to give some flexibility also in the contract. During the contract period, of course, measuring is apparently quite important. We need to somehow understand, do we get the performance that we wanted to have? So we need to have different types of ways of monitoring the performance. Also, communication and feedback collection might be important. So these require also some more like a communicational or even collaborative approach from the procurement. And in the end, of course, the principle in this type of procurement is that it would be done so that the payment is done based on the outcomes of performance received. Here we can present examples of different types of competencies that might be important in performance-based public procurement. They can be technical competencies, they can be strategic competencies, and interpersonal competencies. And in technical competencies, for example, this performance measurement may be a very important skill, and also the skill of setting targets and monitoring those targets may be very important to implement this type of procurement approach successfully. Strategic competencies may relate, for example, to the possibility to think about innovations, and also to take into consideration the life cycle of procured product or service. Also, maybe the ability to learn from best practices can be essential, because this is not so common approach in practice, and all the good examples of applying it may be useful for those who want to try this type of approach. And that's why actually it may be very important that there is a ability to learn also from the best practices from outside of the own organization. Then this performance-based procurement, as said, is requiring quite often also some kind of interaction between supplier and the buyer. And there might be also certain specific competence needs, like co-creation skills or facilitation skills. And also maybe this kind of procurement may contain some kind of change, and there is a need to somehow like be resistant to those kind of changes. Key takeaways from this micro lecture are that when we try to transform public procurement towards wider value benefits, we need new types of thinking, and this performance-based procurement is one way to pursue these kind of wider value benefits. Performance-based procurement fits only to a limited set of procurement cases, so don't apply it in every case. So it's actually very limited set of cases, and maybe those that are, for example, the innovative and sustainable aims for procurement can be actually good examples of cases where this might be actually quite potential approach. But in many cases, the traditional input-focused procurement is the best approach. Benefits of a successful performance-based procurement are quite obvious, but the practical implementation is not so rare, is not so common, is quite rare, and that's why this approach needs to be implemented with care, and also the good examples should and can be learned from others. Measurement is the common challenge in applying this type of procurement, but there are solutions to measurement in the literature and available. And it's also good to remember that there is no such thing as a perfect measure. So also with a little bit like compromised measure, you can still be able to apply this kind of approach in procurement. Thank you for your attention.